Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to talk about flow control. It's one of those, behind the scenes concepts that is absolutely critical to making our digital world actually work.
So let me ask you this. You're streaming a movie, you're deep in a video call, and then buffering. Everything just grinds to a halt. It feels exactly like a traffic jam, right? Well, the reason why might surprise you. It's not always just about raw speed.
A lot of the time, the culprit is something called flow control. The best way to think about it, it's like a traffic cop for your data. Its entire job is to stand there and make sure the sender doesn't just blast data at the receiver faster than it can possibly handle. It stops things from getting totally overwhelmed and losing information. Okay, just a quick heads up before we dive in. What we're doing here is a simplified explainer, okay? We're gonna hit the big ideas to give you a really solid foundation. But if you're the kind of person who wants to see the code and get your hands dirty, we've got you covered. Check out the comments below for full code examples. All right, so to really get why the solutions work, we've got to start with an idea that, well, that doesn't. It's a perfect world scenario that just falls apart in reality. And that's the unrestricted SIMPLEX protocol. Seriously, just imagine someone talking at you at 100 miles an hour, never taking a breath, never checking to see if you're even listening. That's this protocol in a nutshell. It just fires off data, assuming the receiver on the other end is some kind of supercomputer that can catch everything instantly. And yeah, you can probably see the problems here. First, it's totally one way. There's no talking back. Second, there's zero error control. What if a packet gets lost? Too bad. And it makes this wild assumption that the receiver has an infinite amount of memory to just store all this incoming data. It's just not practical for any real network on planet Earth. Okay, so if just blasting data out doesn't work, what's the most logical first fix? Well, you slow down. Let's try taking it just one piece at a time. And that brings us to the stop and wait protocol. Think of this as the complete opposite, the super polite conversationalist. The sender sends exactly one packet of data, a frame, and then it just stops. It literally waits until it gets a message back from the receiver that says, "Yep, got that one." That message is called an acknowledgment, or ACK. The whole process is just like it sounds. Step 1, sender sends a frame. Step 2, sender stops and waits. Step 3, the receiver sends back that ACK. And only then, step 4, the sender sends the next frame. It's this very deliberate, careful dance that, for sure prevents the receiver from getting swamped. So on the one hand, this is great. It's simple. It's super reliable. But, and this is a huge but, it is so inefficient. All of that time spent just waiting around is time the network could be doing something useful. The data pipe is just sitting there, empty. There has to be a better way. And that leads us to the real game changer, the big idea. What if, instead of sending just one tiny frame, we could send a whole bunch of them at once? This is exactly what the sliding window protocol does. It basically opens a window of a certain size, say 5 frames. That means the sender can transmit all 5 of those frames before it has to even think about stopping to wait for an acknowledgement. As you can imagine, this makes a massive difference in keeping that data pipe full and busy. Now, the first flavor of this idea is something called the go back-end protocol. It's definitely an upgrade, but, well, it has a pretty clumsy way of dealing with things when they go wrong. Here's the problem. If even one frame gets lost in transit, this protocol basically panics. So imagine frames 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all sent out. But, frame number 3 gets lost. The sender doesn't just resend number 3. Nope. It goes back to 3 and resends 3, 4, and 5, even if 4 and 5 got there perfectly fine the first time. It's just a huge waste of bandwidth. So clearly we can do better than that, right? How do we fix that inefficiency? Well, with a much smarter, much more surgical approach. And that's the selective repeat protocol. This is where it gets really clever. Let's take the same exact scenario. Frame 3 is lost. With selective repeat, the receiver says, "Hey, I got 1, 2, 4, and 5 just fine. I just need you to send number 3 again." And that's exactly what the sender does. It resends only the single missing frame. So much more efficient, right? It saves a ton of unnecessary work. Okay, that's a lot of theory, but where does this stuff actually show up in the real world? Let's make a connection to something you've probably encountered before, even if you didn't know what it was called. Let's talk about the point-to-point protocol, or PPP for short. This is a classic protocol whose whole job is to set up a direct one-to-one connection between 2 network devices, like your home router and your ISP. And if you're of a certain age, you've definitely used this. Remember dial-up internet? That was PPP. Early DSL connections? Also PPP. It's still used all the time for direct links between big routers on the internet. And the key thing here is that it packs in features like error detection and authentication, the very ideas we've been talking about, to make sure that connection is solid.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground, from a totally useless idea to a pretty sophisticated one. Let's wrap up by putting them all head to head.
This really lays it all out. You can see the evolution right here. We started with stop and wait, sends one frame, super simple error handling. Then we moved to go back n, sends multiple frames, but its error handling is to resend everything. And finally, we landed on selective repeat, sends multiple frames, but it's smart enough to only resend what was actually lost. It's a clear path from simple and slow to more complex and way more efficient. And that's our journey through flow control. It's really the unsung hero of networking, the thing that stops our digital world from descending into chaos. And it leaves you with a pretty big question, right? We're demanding more and more. 8K video, virtual reality, things we haven't even thought of yet. So what's next? What does the next generation of flow control have to look like to keep up with all of that? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.